I never expected to become an orphan at 25. The call came on a rainy Tuesday evening as I was finishing my shift at the bookstore. My roommate Jess answered, her face transforming from mild curiosity to horror in seconds. She handed me the phone with trembling hands, and just like that, my world collapsed. "There's been an accident," the officer said, his voice gruff yet gentle. "Your parents' car went off Spring Valley Bridge. I'm sorry, but they didn't make it." The following days passed in a blur of funeral arrangements, condolence cards, and a hollow ache that seemed to consume me from the inside out. My name is Emma Mitchell, and suddenly I was alone in the world, or so I thought. What I didn't expect was for my Aunt Patricia to swoop in like a vulture circling a carcass. "Such a tragedy," she declared at the funeral reception, her designer black dress immaculate, not a hair out of place despite the gusty cemetery winds. Robert and Claire were always so adventurous. I warned them about those mountain roads. The way she emphasized adventurous made it sound like a character flaw. I'd grown up hearing her subtle digs at my parents' lifestyle choices, their modest home in the suburbs, Dad's career as a high school teacher rather than joining the family business, Mom's preference for gardening over country club memberships. Aunt Patricia had always been the picture of high society, married to Uncle Richard, who came from old money. They lived in the Grand Mitchell family estate, a sprawling Victorian mansion that had been in the family for generations. My grandfather had allowed them to live there after their marriage, and they'd made it the centerpiece of their social standing. "Emma, dear," Patricia approached me after most of the mourners had left, her artificial smile not reaching her eyes. "We need to discuss your future." "My future?" I asked, still numb from grief. "Yes, sweetie. You can't possibly continue living in that tiny apartment. And that little job at the bookstore," she wrinkled her nose. "Your father always had such modest ambitions, but you don't have to follow that path." I bristled at her dismissal of my dad's teaching career, which he'd loved passionately for over 20 years. "I'm doing fine, Aunt Patricia." "Nonsense. You'll come stay with us until you find something more suitable. Though I don't know what kind of prospects you'll have with that liberal arts degree." She sighed dramatically. "If only you'd studied business like your cousin Bradley." Ah yes, Bradley, my cousin who'd failed upward his entire life, currently holding a VP position at my uncle's company despite being spectacularly incompetent. "I appreciate the offer, but I'm staying in my apartment," I said firmly. Patricia's smile hardened. "Don't be ridiculous. You can barely make rent, and with your parents gone." She lowered her voice as if sharing a shameful secret. "Well, we all know they didn't leave much behind." That stung. My parents hadn't been wealthy, but they'd been comfortable. Dad had always been careful with money, and Mom had inherited some investments from her parents. They'd paid for my college education without loans, which was more than most of my friends could say. "Actually," I began, but Patricia cut me off. "It's settled then. Richard will send someone for your things tomorrow." Without waiting for my response, she glided away to speak to the funeral director, leaving me seething. The next day, I met with Mr. Harrington, my parents' lawyer. He was a kind, grandfatherly man who'd been handling their affairs for decades. "Emma, before we get to the will, there's something you should know," he said, sliding a folder across his desk. "Your father asked me to give you this privately." Inside was a letter in my dad's neat handwriting. "My dearest Emma, if you're reading this, the worst has happened. Mom and I always hoped we have decades more with you, but life doesn't always follow our plans. There's something we never told you about our family history. My father, your grandfather, was a complicated man. When I chose to become a teacher instead of joining the family business, he was disappointed. But privately he told me he respected my choice to follow my own path." What Patricia never knew was that before he died, Dad changed his will. The family estate was left to me, not Richard. However, I allowed Patricia and Richard to continue living there, never correcting their assumption that it belonged to them. Their pride would have been wounded, and what was the point? Mom and I were happy in our little house. We never told you because we didn't want to burden you with family secrets, but now, everything passes to you, including the Mitchell estate. Use this knowledge wisely, Emma. You have a kind heart, but don't let Patricia bully you. She's always felt entitled to everything the Mitchell name represents. We love you more than words can say. Dad." I looked up at Mr. Harrington stunned. "Is this true?" He nodded solemnly. "Every word. The estate, the family investments, even the vacation property in Vermont. They all passed to your father upon your grandfather's death, and now they pass to you. The official reading of the will was scheduled for the following week. I spent that time in a daze processing not only my grief but this extraordinary revelation. My parents have lived modestly by choice, not necessity. They could have claimed the mansion, the status, everything Patricia had lorded over them for years. But they chose their quiet, happy life instead. The day of the will reading, I arrived at Mr. Harrington's office to find Patricia and Richard already there, along with Bradley. Patricia had that same condescending smile that had always made me feel small. "Emma, darling, have you packed your things? Richard's assistant can pick them up after this formality." I just nodded, not trusting myself to speak yet. As Mr. Harrington read through the standard legal preamble, Patricia examined her manicure, looking bored. But when he got to the part about the distribution of assets, her head snapped up. "To my daughter, Emma Claire Mitchell, I leave all my worldly possessions, including but not limited to all bank accounts, investment portfolios, my share in Mitchell Enterprises, and all real estate holdings, specifically the Mitchell family estate at 47 Oakwood Drive, the vacation property at Lake Champlain, Vermont, and my personal residence." Patricia's face drained of color. "That's impossible," she interrupted. "The estate belongs to Richard. It was left to him when father died." Mr. Harrington adjusted his glasses. "Actually, Mrs. Mitchell, the family estate was left to Robert Mitchell. He simply allowed you and your husband to reside there." "That's absurd," Richard sputtered, his face reddening. "I've been paying the property taxes for 20 years. "No," Mr. Harrington corrected gently. "Robert set up an account that automatically paid the taxes and maintenance costs. I have all the documentation here." Bradley looked between his parents in confusion. "Wait, are you saying we don't own our house?" "It appears," I said, finding my voice at last, "that you've been living in my house." Patricia stood up, her hands shaking. "This is a mistake. Robert wouldn't. He couldn't." She turned to me, her eyes flashing. "You put him up to this, didn't you? Always the quiet one, but scheming behind our backs." I thought of all the times Patricia had made snide comments about my parents, about me. The Christmas dinners where she questioned my career choices. The family gatherings where she compared me unfavorably to Bradley, despite his mediocrity. "I knew nothing about this until yesterday," I said calmly. "But it seems grandfather saw something in my father that he never saw in Uncle Richard." Richard slammed his hand on the desk. "I'll contest this. Robert had no right." "Actually," Mr. Harrington interrupted, "he had every legal right. And the statute of limitations for contesting your father's will expired 19 years ago." Patricia's face contorted with rage and disbelief. "You can't possibly mean to enforce this, Emma. We're family. That house has been our home for decades." I thought about what my parents would do. They had let Patricia and Richard keep their illusions of superiority all these years, never correcting them, never using their actual power to humble them. But I wasn't my parents. "I'll need the keys by Friday," I said quietly. Patricia's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "You worthless little—" she began, but Richard grabbed her arm, silencing her. "You can't just throw us out. Where are we supposed to go?" I considered the question. "You have the vacation house in the Hamptons, don't you? The one you're always bragging about at family gatherings." "That's a summer home," Patricia practically shrieked. "It's not winterized. It's February." "Then I suggest you start looking for a rental," I replied, gathering my things. "I'm sure with Uncle Richard's business acumen you've saved plenty for a rainy day." The look of pure shock on their faces told me otherwise. Had they been living beyond their means all this time, counting on an inheritance that was never coming? As I turned to leave, Patricia grabbed my arm. "You can't do this to us, after everything we've offered you." "What exactly have you offered me, Aunt Patricia?" "Criticism. Condescension. A spare room out of obligation while you remind me daily of my supposed inadequacies." I gently removed her hand. "I'm not doing this to you. This is simply the truth coming to light." In the days that followed, I learned more about my family's finances than I ever expected. The Mitchell estate was just the tip of the iceberg. My grandfather had built a considerable fortune that had grown under my father's quiet stewardship. There were investments, business holdings, and assets that made me financially independent many times over. True to my word, I showed up at the Mitchell estate on Friday afternoon. What I didn't expect was to find a moving van in the driveway and several workers carrying out antiques and artwork. I quickly called Mr. Harrington, who assured me he'd handle it. Within an hour, the police had arrived, and Patricia and Richard were being questioned about removing valuable items from the property. "These are family heirlooms," Patricia insisted, gesturing wildly at a painting being returned to the foyer. "They belong to the Mitchell family." "Yes," I agreed, stepping forward. "And I'm the Mitchell who owns them now." The look of hatred in her eyes would have wounded me once. Now I just felt sad for her. The police supervised as the movers returned everything to the house. A tearful Patricia was escorted to her car by an ashen-faced Richard. "You'll regret this," she hissed as she passed me. "The family will hear what you've done." "The family will hear the truth," I replied, perhaps for the first time. After they left, I stood alone in the grand entrance hall of the Mitchell estate. My estate. The house was beautiful, with its soaring ceilings and intricate woodwork, but it felt cold, unlived in despite having been occupied for years. I wandered from room to room, running my hands over furniture that had been in my family for generations. In what had been my grandfather's study, I found a photograph I'd never seen before. My dad as a young man, standing proudly next to my grandfather. They were smiling, looking so similar it was startling. As tears welled in my eyes, my phone rang. It was Jess checking on me. "How did it go?" she asked cautiously. "They're gone," I said, still staring at the photograph. "But I don't know if I want to live here. It's so big and full of history." "Well," Jess said thoughtfully, "you could always sell it." "Maybe," I replied, "or maybe something else." 6 months later, the Mitchell estate had been transformed. The East Wing had been converted into a community center offering after-school programs for underprivileged kids. The gardens had been opened to the public, with a portion dedicated to a community vegetable garden. And I'd established the Robert and Claire Mitchell Scholarship Fund for students pursuing education degrees. Patricia and Richard never spoke to me again, though I heard through family grapevine that they'd had to downsize considerably, moving into a condo in the city. Bradley, surprisingly, reached out after a few months. "I didn't know," he said awkwardly when we met for coffee, "about how Mom treated your dad, or you." "It's not your fault," I assured him. Still, he shifted uncomfortably. "I should have seen it. And for what it's worth, I'm sorry." I believed him, and when he asked if he could volunteer at the community center, I agreed. On the anniversary of my parents' death, I stood in the garden they would have loved, surrounded by blooming flowers and the sounds of children laughing in the distance. I couldn't bring my parents back, but I could honor them by using their legacy the way they would have wanted, to help others, to create joy, to build rather than divide. "I hope I'm making you proud," I whispered to the garden, imagining them there with me. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves, and for just a moment, I felt less alone. In the end, the true inheritance my parents left me wasn't the money or the estate. It was the example of how to live with integrity and kindness, even when faced with those who have neither. That was a legacy worth more than all the Mitchell fortune combined.